Something is wrong with Spider-Man. Something is wrong with Mr. Negative. And it's time to figure all of that out. Welcome to the Comicstorian channel, where I take some of your favorite trade paperbacks and single issues and I break them down into digestible bites to help you understand. Then I read them dramatically back to you. All alterations to the panels, text, and images are to prevent copyright problems, and all art is owned by its respective companies. Today we're going to be continuing our amazing Spider-Man saga, catching you up with the storyline that includes brand new suits, brand new villains, and the return of Harry Osborn. Today is going to be issues 58 to 60, and when we last left off, Harry Osborn is now possessed by a demon that is using the ability to rip sins out of people as a way to get revenge on Spider-Man. Well, when Spider-Man and Norman Osborn and Wilson Fisk all teamed up to get rid of Kindred, all those sins went back to people. And one of those people who had his sins removed and now has to deal with all the things he did in the past is Mr. Negative, aka Martin Lee. We're also going to discover today what's going wrong with Spider-Man. Why is he having so many problems as we prep for the inevitable final battle? That's right, today is issues 58 to 60. The link to the playlist is down below. And if you want to keep this channel going, consider hitting the subscribe button, smashing that like button, and joining us at Patreon. Let's get into Spider-Man. Spider-Man readies himself. His costume is torn and he is bloody. Come on then! I said come on! The Negative demons leaping across the room, their swords prepared to turn his skin into ribbons. But a short time earlier, May Parker continued to help Martin Lee, who had arrived at the doorstep of the Feast organization. The man pushes her away, though, believing that he is not worthy of her help. Help isn't something the needy earn, Martin. It's something they're owed, she says to him with a smile, repeating the words that she first heard from him. She looks at him, asking what is going on and how he ended up on her doorstep, and Martin nods, explaining that he tried to fight against the aspect of Mr. Negative in his psyche for so long, but he finally gave up. He was buried deep in the villain's mind, losing more and more of himself each day, and yet he saw the Sin Eater on television one day and knew that it was his chance. He fought for control of their body and sought out the Sin Eater, finally getting one he deserved. The blast to the chest ripped the sin out of his body, and Mr. Negative was no more. He lived on the streets, having nothing, and he was happier than he ever thought possible. But it didn't last. Eventually, something happened, and the sins came back, and with it, Mr. Negative. But somehow Martin managed to expel the demon once more, and finally free, he ran to the only place he could think of for help, May Parker. But I should have never come. He blacked out once, which meant that Negative was in control again. I don't know what he did with those slivers of time, or what trap he set for me. Outside, looking down on the building from the darkness of the rooftops, the inner demons watch and wait. Meanwhile, across the city, Peter Parker sits down with his old friend, Liz Allen. She smiles, happy to catch up and apologize for Harry missing his friend, telling Peter that the last she spoke to him, Harry was in Paris. Peter's face darkens as he explains that that's why he wanted to talk to her. He grows angry as he tells her everything about Kindred, about coming back from the dead, about the sins of the villains being relinquished by Harry. Well, he at least gave her enough information without giving away his secret. She grows angry with him. She calls him a liar. She tells him that she is constantly watching for warning signs. I'm telling you, whoever this is, whoever they have in custody, it is not Harry Osborn. Tears then begin to swell up in her eyes as a voice calls. It's not true, Mom. Normie stands there, and Liz tries to comfort her son, explaining that they were just pretending. But he tells his mother that she doesn't have to lie. I'm not a kid anymore, he says, and Peter believes him, thinking back on the recent events with Norman and the Carnage symbiotes. Dad lies to me too. He lies to everyone, Normie explains, leading them through the house. And inside of one of the closets, he presses a few buttons on a keypad, and the wall slides away, revealing a gobbling glider and several pumpkin bombs. Liz is shocked by the sight, but Peter is less than surprised. Suddenly, there's a knock on the door, and Peter turns to answer it, and anger fills his eyes as he sees the one and only Norman Osborn standing in the doorway. Liz storms across the house, shouting at her father-in-law, "You're behind this, aren't you? You're the one that did this to Harry!" She yells. She orders the man to leave, and Peter begins to push him out of the door. "Actually, Peter, I'm here to see you," Norman explains, asking to speak to Peter in private, and they step into the hallway, with Peter slamming him into the wall, demanding to know how Norman knew where he was. "I have the house under protective surveillance," Norman explains, but Peter snarls at him to leave him alone. "Please, Peter, I'm trying, but this couldn't wait, and it involves someone you love," Norman explains. He goes on to tell him that Fisk was at Ravencroft Institute and he overheard the mayor discussing the impending attack on Feast Center. Isn't that run by May Parker? Norman explains, and panic fills Peter's mind. He gets a pit in his stomach as he shouts to Liz that he'll be back. In moments, he's swinging across the city as Spider-Man, and in the center, there's a deep boom against the walls, with both Martin and May looking up. What was that? Many people question, and Martin stands, feeling the presence of his sins outside. Like most evil spirits, he can't enter holy ground. He explains to her, and May nods. If you can't get in, then you're going to stay right here, she tells him, but suddenly there's a crash as the inner demons enter the building, kicking through the doors, destroying everything in their path as they search for Martin Lee. As they find the pair in the utility closet, Martin steps in front of May. Get back, May! I'll do the fighting, he tells her, but he is shocked as the demon is yanked back out the door with Spider-Man stepping into view. May Parker, are you okay? He asks quickly, and then pauses in shock. Is that Martin Lee? He orders them to stay put and slams the door shut as the inner demons descend upon him. Blades slicing through him as he punches the demons away. One slamming into his friend, a sword piercing through his chest. But the demons get back up as Spider-Man watches. You know, I almost forgot how hard you guys are to hurt. Normally that wouldn't be a problem for me, but right now, with the week I'm having, that's just what I needed. Meanwhile, Mayor Fisk is now standing in front of Kindred's cell. He remembers when he sought the demon out, and when the demon refused his request, he turns now to the emissary of Mr. Negative to hear his offer. You have invited chaos into my city and asked me to look the other way. Tell me, what does Mr. Negative have to offer? Demon nods, explaining that Mr. Negative knows what Fisk desires. To make that real, you will need more than the tablet of life and destiny. Meanwhile, Norman knocks on the door to Liz Allen's apartment, begging her to let him in, hoping to make up for the horrible things that he has done to his family. I didn't come here to ask for forgiveness. I came because I've been put in charge of Harry's progress, and I thought you might want to see him. Tears glisten in Liz's eyes from the other side of the door. Meanwhile, back at the Feast Center, May Parker opens up a trap door in the floor, motioning for Martin Lee to get into the crawl space. We're getting out of here. I've always wondered why you put these crawl spaces under the building, Martin. Now I suppose I have an answer. Outside of the room, Spider-Man continues his battle, flipping over the heads of the inner demons, lashing out with his feet and fists. He dodges their blades, kicking out and catching some in the face, but there are too many and the cuts begin to appear on his costume, blood oozing from dozens of wounds. Meanwhile, over at Ravencroft, Liz is led through the darkened halls until she stands before the creature that her husband has become. She's overwhelmed with terror and grief breaking down, tears streaming out of her eyes as she places her hand on the hardened, dark dimension energy. But as Spider-Man continues to struggle and fight, one of the demons turns, stabbing down into the floor, almost impaling May and Martin. The floor cracks and breaks as he pulls the elderly woman out of the crawl space, holding her up. Stop, or the woman dies! He shouts as Spider-Man stops mid-punch, turning to the demon. Let her go! Finally, it is Martin who appears out of the crawl space. That is enough! Do as he says and let her go. I will come along peacefully. May tries to argue as she is released, but Martin shakes his head. This is what is for the best. It has brought me much happiness to see you here and see this place rebuilt. I will not allow it to be destroyed again on my account, he tells her with a sad smile. He walks into the street looking up to see his sin floating like a smoky cloud of evil. He closes his eyes as the monster charges towards him, and there's a bright flash of light and Spider-Man and the others are forced to look away, and when they look back, Mr. Negative turns and smiles at them. Ah, so good to be home. He moves into the group congratulating his men on the good work that they have done. As tempting as it might be to burn this place to the ground to kill the old woman, I'd say we can afford to be generous tonight. Let's be on our way, he says to his crew, but Spider-Man steps forward. I don't think so. One way or another, I'm bringing you in. That won't be necessary, wall crawler. Wilson Fisk calls from the doorway, and in seconds, SWAT officers flood the room, weapons raised. Spider-Man is shocked as Fisk explains that they are responding to a report of trouble in the city. Where are you taking him? Spider-Man demands as Mr. Negative is cuffed. Into custody, of course. Isn't that what you were just saying? That you would bring him to the police? No need to trouble yourself, the police are already here, he says with a broad smile, and with that, the police and the inner demons leave. May and Spider-Man watch as they disappear into the night, standing in the destruction of the Feast Center. May waves as Spider-Man swings off into the night, and moments later, Peter arrives, calling to May. I'm fine, Peter, but you're bleeding, May points out as she sees a trickle of blood running down his arm. Peter thinks quickly, explaining that he tripped on some rubble on his way in, and they hug. Peter asks her to call the police next time that Martin Lee shows up at the doorstep. Later, Mr. Negative sits across from Fisk in his office. "I have lived up to my end of the bargain, Lee. Now it is time to honor yours." "Of course, Mr. Negative is nothing if not a man of his word," he says simply, placing a box on the table explaining that the tablet of life and destiny isn't enough, that the user must also possess the tablet of death and entropy. He opens the box, revealing the glowing tablet, explaining that whoever has both tablets will have the power of resurrection in his hands. "You agree to my terms. My former territories are returned to me. I can offer you that, but why not more?" He motions for Lee to follow him and they head into his office, and as they walk, Fisk explains that he is trying to acquire the other tablet, but it has proven difficult. Even with the considerable amount of power that the mayor's office has afforded him, he has decided to benefit from a more corrupt approach. "So you want me to steal the Lifeline tablet for you?" Negative asks, and Fisk nods as he opens up the doors to his boardroom. "In return, I am prepared to be very generous, but I must warn you, you will have some competition," Fisk explains as he motions to a room of supervillains. And there you have issue 58 and 59 of Amazing Spider-Man telling the story of the return of Mr. Negative. Now before we go into issue 60 and see about Mary Jane moving away, here's a little word from our sponsor, Mint Mobile. After years of getting ripped off by big wireless providers and tons of fine print contracts, it's time to say enough and get a phone plan that saves money without sacrificing quality. Well, Mint Mobile is just the thing. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless plans starting at just $15 a month. That's it. All plans come with an unlimited talk and text, plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can even use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone number. And if you aren't completely satisfied, Mint Mobile has you covered with their 7-day money-back guarantee. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/complete. That's mintmobile.com/complete. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/complete. Now we go to issue 60. The darkness surrounds the graveyard. Kindred standing over a grave, his centipede tendrils drifting back and forth as they plunge into the ground. And he smiles. Peter wakes up with a startled scream. "Oh good, you're awake," Mary Jane says as she walks into the room, carrying a plate of breakfast. Peter shakes his head, apologizing for all the screaming, but Mary Jane interrupts him, shoving food into his mouth. "No time for moody narration now, Tiger. You and I have a place to be," she tells him with a smile, and a short time later, the two of them are walking through the city. "Have you heard from Carly lately? She left me a weird message. She sounded upset and then texted me to tell me that she had to go out of town," Mary Jane says as they finally stop in front of a rundown theater. Peter is confused as they stop outside of the theater, but it dawns on him that this is the theater that Norman Osborn rebuilt all of those years ago, and Mary Jane smiles, reminding him that this is where she got her big break. The building is run down as Mary Jane leads him in, explaining that she got a set of keys from the owner. "I told him that I needed a place to practice while I was out of town," she tells Peter. Peter's a little confused, wondering if Mary Jane wants him to read lines with her or why they couldn't just do the lines back at the apartment. "Afraid not. What we're doing requires a bit more of a real thing," she says, pulling a lever, and a spotlight suddenly shines down on Peter. "And they're not my lines, they're yours. After all, this is your show," she tells him as he looks surprised. He doesn't understand what she means, and she crosses the room, explaining that she knows that there is something his subconscious wants to say to Harry. Peter looks away. "You want me to pretend that he's here?" "I want you to believe that he's here," she explains, telling him that this has worked for her in the past. She went and saw a therapist after Gwen Stacy died, and this idea allowed her to finally say goodbye to her friend. She finally sits in the front row, asking him to just try it for her. He feels weird, but he closes his eyes and he tries the techniques that she suggests. He imagines that night at the mausoleum, the night that he fought the Green Goblin and Kindred. The dark energy that seeped through the walls and captured his former friend. And when he opens his eyes, Kindred is sitting in the front row. "You've got something to say?" the demon asks. And Peter stares at him for a moment, stumbling over his words. I don't know where to start. I don't know how to do this." "Just try," Kindred tells him simply. Peter begins to build up steam as he goes, talking about how he heard what Harry said as he was being captured. And he questions why Harry couldn't just talk to him and explain everything. "Like, how you got this way? All I know is that it's the same as always. You blame me." Anger flashes across Peter's face as he points out that Harry and Norman have that in common. They always blame Peter for everything that has happened to them. But this time, Peter can't shake the feeling that it might actually be his fault. Peter unburdens himself about how he put the mask on because he blamed himself for what happened to Uncle Ben. But he feels like he's going through an endless cycle of punishment for his choices and decisions. Like, this is always going to be my life. He points out that he has no marriage anymore, no kids. He's barely making ends meet. That every time he thinks life is changing, things seem to go back to where they began. I'm always losing the ones that I love. He whispers and he looks at Kindred again, talking about how he had to beat Norman at Ravencroft and told the older Osborn that he was done with both Harry and Norman. But we all know that I was lying. So tell me how to fix this, Harry. Tell me what to do. I'll confess anything, do anything. Just tell me what to do. He finishes with tears in his eyes. And when he opens them again, Mary Jane is there, pulling him in for a hug. A short while later, the two of them sit at the edge of the stage. Do you feel any better? She asks after a short time of silence. And Peter nods, explaining that he feels free, as if a weight has been lifted for now. I'm gonna miss you so much. But Mary Jane shakes her head, explaining that she's not going back to LA. They kiss and he tells her that she's amazing. Oh God, class! He suddenly shouts and Mary Jane smiles as he pulls out his mask and begins to run across the room. You're already late. You might want to change. So a few moments pass as she stands quietly in the darkness of the theater. You're early, she says, turning to the man standing in the darkness. How much of that did you hear? Enough to hear you make promises you can't keep. But MJ shakes her head, explaining how great it will be for the movie to be premiered in the city where it's set. That's not the point. This was supposed to be a creative partnership. Mysterio tells her as he steps out of the shadows in a swirl of smoke. Huh. How do you suppose your date will feel when he learns who you've been working with on your grand performance comeback? He asks, and she shakes her head, explaining that she'll tell Peter soon. She looks at Quentin Beck for a moment, questioning whether he knows something about Kindred and what's been happening, but Mysterio looks at her, telling her that some things are best left unknown. You know what they say about the road to hell. Meanwhile, Doctor Strange steps out of a portal in the front of a casino owner's office, and the guard tries to stop him, but in a moment, he's sent through the doorway, and Strange strides in. Honestly, Steven, would it kill you to make an appointment? Some of us have a business to run. Enough. I'm not here to play games with you. A powerful demon is running loose, targeting a good friend of mine, calls himself Kindred. Strange snaps, and Mephisto shakes his head, admitting, I've never heard of that demon, Strange. Besides, most of my former associates don't leave forwarding addresses. Afraid I won't be of much use to you, Mephisto admits, but Strange shakes his head, explaining, I already have a way to track the demon. No, what I found when I looked is what concerns me. Tell me, devil, what is wrong with Peter Parker's soul? And there you have it, the conclusion to issue 60 on the Kindred saga, right here at the Comicstorian channel. If you want to know what happens next, which includes a brand new costume, make sure you subscribe to the channel, smash that like button like the Hulk, and join us over at Patreon to join the community and the vote for what comes to the channel next. I hope you guys are enjoying this. I really do enjoy what Nick Spencer started doing with Kindred. I just feel like the ramp up took way too much time, but now that we're doing it, it's awesome. Let me know in the comments down below what you think, and I'll see you next time right here at the Comicstorian channel.